The storm had passed hours ago, but its devastation lingered like a shadow over the countryside. Broken branches littered the muddy fields, and scattered shingles glistened under the pale morning sun. The small farmhouse at the edge of the property looked battered, its roof partially torn away, windows splintered, and the once pristine garden reduced to a tangle of debris. Yet, despite the chaos, life stirred. George, an elderly man with weathered hands and a back slightly stooped from decades of labor, was already at work. He lifted a heavy beam, mud clinging to his boots, and carefully propped it against the weakened framework of the house. His wife, Mary, equally determined though frailer, gathered shingles from the ground, stacking them neatly in a worn wheelbarrow. The wind still whispered remnants of the storm, but they worked as if the weather could not touch them. From the road, John's truck rolled slowly, tires crunching on wet gravel. He was a wealthy rancher, known in the county for his vast lands and sharp business mind. Yet as he approached the old couple's property, he found himself slowing, mesmerized by their quiet determination. He had seen destruction before, seen lives overturned by floods or tornadoes, but something about this couple caught his attention. They didn't shout, they didn't panic, they simply worked together. John stopped his truck at the edge of the driveway. He could see every detail from here. George's calloused hands gripping the beam, the faint smile Mary wore despite her exhaustion, the way they communicated with small gestures, each nod or glance saying more than words ever could. The storm had taken much, yet they refused to let it take their spirit. John felt a tug in his chest, a mixture of admiration and something uncomfortably like guilt. For a long moment, he watched. The muddy field, the scattered debris, the torn roof, it was all visible proof of struggle. And yet, the couple's resilience made it beautiful in a strange, solemn way. It reminded him of the first time he had taken over his family's ranch, learning to bend to the land rather than fight it. He remembered long days and nights, aching muscles, and the pride of seeing results born from hard work. Finally, George spotted the truck and paused, resting against the beam. "Morning," he called, voice hoarse but steady. Mary gave a small wave, brushing a strand of gray hair from her forehead. John stepped out, his polished boots sinking slightly into the mud. The contrast between his clean, expensive clothes and the couple's worn, practical attire struck him, yet he felt no superiority, only a desire to help, though he wasn't sure how. He didn't speak immediately, simply observing them for a few more moments, appreciating the rhythm of their work. It was humbling. Slowly, he spoke, his voice carrying over the scattered debris. "You folks need some help." George and Mary exchanged a glance, pride and hesitation flashing in their eyes. Then, almost imperceptibly, they nodded. John's offer seemed to hang in the air for a moment, almost heavier than the storm clouds that still lingered on the horizon. George's hands, still gripping the beam, froze for an instant. Mary's eyes flickered with hesitation, her lips pressed tightly together. Pride was a stubborn companion for people who had worked their land for decades, and accepting help felt like admitting weakness. Yet, when she looked at the roof, the broken shingles, the sagging walls, she knew they could not do it alone. "All right," George finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "If you're serious, then, thank you." John nodded, and without another word, he returned to his truck. Moments later, a small group of workers emerged, each carrying ladders, tools, and fresh supplies. The sight of John's team, efficient and organized, initially intimidated George and Mary, but the couple quickly adapted. Mary guided a worker to lift a bundle of shingles, pointing to the damaged section of the roof. "Place it there," she instructed softly, "and make sure it's secure." Her hands were delicate, but her instructions carried authority born of years of experience. George took a deep breath and continued lifting the heavy wooden beams, with John at his side. The rancher's strong arms and steady hands made the work faster, yet he moved with care, following George's instructions. "Careful with that corner," George said, pointing to a splintered beam. "It's fragile." John nodded, adjusting his grip, and the two men worked side by side, each respecting the other's strength. As the morning turned into afternoon, the rhythm of labor became almost meditative. Mary laughed softly when a young worker accidentally dropped a bundle of shingles, sending them tumbling into the mud. "It's all right," she said warmly. "We'll just try again." Her laughter was infectious, and soon the others were smiling, sharing small jokes despite the sweat and grime. The air, once heavy with storm remnants, now carried a sense of hope and collaboration. By mid-afternoon, the house began to take shape. Sections of the roof were repaired, walls stabilized, and the small porch now seemed sturdy again. George stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow, and allowed himself a small, proud smile. Mary placed a hand on his shoulder, and for a moment, they simply watched their home, standing firm against the sky. John handed Mary a bottle of water, and she took it with a grateful nod. "We never expected this," she said softly. "Thank you." John shrugged modestly. "Sometimes, you just need a few extra hands," he said, scanning the property. He noticed small things: the broken fence, the toppled garden boxes, the muddy path that would need repair. But for now, he let the couple enjoy the sight of progress. He realized that helping wasn't just about fixing what the storm had destroyed, it was about restoring a sense of security, of hope, and of dignity. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, John stood with George and Mary on the porch. Dusting off their hands, they all took a moment to absorb the transformation. Though the storm had left its mark, the day's effort had begun to erase it, leaving behind something stronger, a renewed spirit, a bond forged in sweat and determination, and the promise that the farm would endure another season. By late afternoon, the farmhouse had begun to regain its former shape. The roof was patched, walls reinforced, and the porch sturdy enough to support the weight of two people without a creak. The sun, now dipping low behind the distant hills, cast long golden streaks across the property, highlighting the sweat and determination etched into George and Mary's faces. Dust clung to their clothes, mud smeared their boots, yet they moved with a quiet pride that no storm could erase. John surveyed the scene from the edge of the yard, noting every detail: the repaired sections of the house, the cleared debris, the small garden boxes standing upright again. His team continued their work, hammering and lifting beams, but John's gaze kept returning to the old couple. Despite their frailty, they had guided the repairs with precision and grace. There was a strength here he hadn't expected, a resilience that money could never buy. Finally, John stepped forward, raising his voice to carry across the yard. "All stop now," he said firmly. The words hung in the air, startling everyone into silence. George's hands paused mid-lift, nails digging into the beam. Mary straightened, glancing at him with a questioning look. "What do you mean?" George asked, wary yet curious. "You've done enough for today," John explained, his tone gentle but insistent. "We'll handle the rest. You need a break. No more lifting, no more climbing, no more worrying." His team lowered the tools, and for the first time that day, George and Mary stepped back, allowing others to continue. Pride and gratitude mingled in their expressions, a delicate balance they had not experienced in years. Mary's hands trembled slightly as she leaned against the porch railing, exhaustion finally catching up to her. George stood beside her, shoulders slumped but heart full. For years, they had depended solely on themselves, learning to weather every storm with sweat and stubbornness. Yet now, in this quiet moment, they understood something new: accepting help did not diminish their strength, it enhanced it. John handed Mary a glass of lemonade, condensation dripping onto her fingers. "Here," he said, "you deserve this." She took it slowly, savoring the cool sweetness, while George allowed himself a rare laugh, rough and warm. The workers continued moving around them, stacking wood, clearing debris, and securing the remaining fragile structures. The couple observed quietly, hands clasped together, taking in the transformation. The wind had calmed, carrying with it the faint scent of wet earth and pine. Birds began to return, their songs weaving through the repaired fences and restored garden boxes. For the first time since the storm, the farm felt alive again, not just physically but emotionally. The couple's eyes met John's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. This was more than help, it was a connection, a reminder that human kindness could restore what nature had tried to destroy. As the sun slipped behind the hills, casting shadows over the farm, John lingered for a moment. He realized that wealth and power were insignificant compared to the bonds forged in shared labor and genuine care. George and Mary, standing side by side on the porch, smiled at him, a simple, profound gesture. And in that smile, John found a quiet satisfaction, knowing that today, something far more lasting than repairs had been built. Evening settled over the countryside, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and soft lavender. The storm had long passed, leaving behind a landscape washed clean, the air crisp and fragrant with wet earth and pine. George and Mary stood on their porch, hands intertwined, looking out over their property. The house, though not perfect, now stood sturdy and warm, a testament to resilience, hard work, and a little unexpected kindness. John's truck rumbled slowly down the driveway, its headlights cutting through the dimming light. He paused for a moment, glancing back at the old couple. They waved, small gestures that carried a depth of gratitude words could never capture. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that today he had not just repaired a home, but restored hope. The connection he had felt throughout the day lingered like a gentle warmth in his chest, stronger than anything money could buy. As John drove away, George leaned heavily against the porch railing, glancing at the repaired roof and the cleared yard. "Mary," he said softly, voice carrying the weariness of years yet tinged with relief, "I don't know how we could have managed without him." Mary squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening. "We've always believed in ourselves, George. But maybe, accepting help doesn't make us weak. It just reminds us that we're not alone." The couple moved inside the farmhouse, the creak of the floorboards sounding comforting and familiar. They lit a small lamp, the warm glow filling the room, and set about a quiet dinner. Outside, the workers finished their tasks, stacking firewood, securing the barn, and leaving the property tidy. John's team respected the couple's space, their presence unseen yet profoundly felt. In the distance, the first stars began to appear, twinkling over the repaired farm like tiny promises of tomorrow. Days passed, and John continued to check on the couple. He brought fresh supplies, small comforts, and sometimes just his company. George and Mary welcomed him into their home, offering coffee and stories from their long life together. The bond that had begun as a moment of charity evolved into something deeper, friendship, trust, and mutual respect. The rancher realized that his wealth could provide more than material aid, it could offer security, stability, and human connection. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, George sighed contentedly. "You've done more than repair our house," he said quietly. "You've repaired our faith in people." Mary nodded in agreement, smiling at John. "It's not just about the walls and roof. It's about knowing that someone cares enough to stand with you, even when it's not their fight." John smiled, humbled. "I've learned more from you two than I could ever teach," he admitted. Strength, patience, persistence, and the value of kindness. The farm, once battered by nature's fury, now felt alive again. The house stood firm, the land vibrant, and the bond between the old couple and the young rancher stronger than ever. The storm had left scars, yes, but it had also left lessons, that resilience, generosity, and human connection were the true foundations of life. As night settled over the countryside, the farmhouse glowed warmly against the darkening sky, a beacon of hope and perseverance. Inside, laughter mingled with the soft crackle of the fireplace. Outside, stars shone bright, and for the first time in days, the world felt at peace. The storm had ended, but its story, the story of a rich rancher, an old couple, and the power of shared humanity, would live on forever.